Good day and welcome to episode 3 of our Micro Focus 6-part episodes on security and how do we ensure a holistic approach to security for our customers. Once again, we are joined by Boaz from BoaTech, and I'd like to thank you for putting up with me and coming back for another episode. It's pretty cool. We must be doing something right. So Boaz, before we go into security and the security strategy, if you were going to write a book today about being a leader in South African business, what would chapter 1 be about? Lessons learned.
I would mention data in chapter 1. I will talk about how data is changing people's lives, our lives, and most importantly, organizations, because data is what we generate every day. On our cell phones, when you take a video, we send a voice note, we send a message on WhatsApp. We're generating data, and how data has evolved and how it's changing our lives and how it's becoming an industry on its own.
Excellent, I like that. As the owner of BoaTech and a partner of Micro Focus multinational company, the 7th biggest organization software only in the world, how do you manage work-life balance? Is that a myth or do you get it right?
I think conceptually it's a myth, but what happens on a daily basis, it really pushes you to have a balance, because if you spend too much on work, you just become drained. And then we spoke about mountain biking. That for me has become a new golf. Even though I'm still a golfer, waking up in the morning at 5 and going for a ride and coming back, it feels good. And I feel like I've done my bit of work-life balance, and finding within a space of a week, at least a round of golf, that also helps. So that's my description of work-life balance.
That sounds like a pretty good work-life balance. I didn't hear anything about doing the kids' homework yet. We're going to talk about that a little bit. You've got 2 kids. Becoming a dad, did that change your view on company and how to run it, or have they just fitted in?
I think they just fitted in. Talking about work-life balance, I do get my bit of picking them up from school, taking them to school from time to time, after work, and then I have a call, after picking them up, but I still find a bit of just going to buy them ice cream after work. And I think my daughter becomes a bit more demanding than my son, because she always wants something after school. She feels she needs a reward for going to school. So,
so I feel that about going to work every day. I need a reward for being here, and then people remind me I'm paid for this. So I got my reward. So a quick question for you, a little bit off-piste. Boaz, we've been for 18 months under a COVID new world. Everything's changed. If you had 4 tickets for you, your wife, your 2 kids, to go on vacation for 2 weeks anywhere in the world, where would you go now?
It's an easy answer, because I think it has to be all about what my kids have been bugging me about. I'll go to Disney World.
Really?
Yeah, I'll go to Orlando. Yeah, for 2 weeks, switching off, cell phone signal, not roaming, pretty much. Yeah.
Have you been to the States before?
No, haven't.
You haven't been there. Yeah, you would love it. It's like a country of big toys for big kids. You would really enjoy it. And if you go on holiday in South Africa, where does the head of BoaTech go to on holiday in South Africa?
I'm a big fan of wildlife. So every year I go to the Kruger. I take my son. We spend about a week or 2 in the wild looking for big cats and some wild dogs. Been unfortunate in the last couple of years not to see a wild dog. I see hyenas and everything, but just a wild dog has eluded me. Kruger for me is the destination, because I get to relax, to unwind, peace of mind, just interacting with nature. That is for me my favorite holiday. But my wife and my daughter, they're not buying it.
Oh no! So it's boy time.
Absolutely.
For our international audience, Kruger Park happens to be the size of a country in Europe. I think it's Switzerland, and it's one of the traditional holiday areas for South Africans, and I share that with you. And having my wife as a photographer, my wife is a photographer, but her happy space is in the bush too, so you can always invite her along. She'll go with you. Today's episode is all about security strategies and what is the security strategy and why is it important that this is a deliberate security strategy. In the last episode, we spoke about an enterprise security model which is secured by design. And the very first episode, we spoke about understanding what information we have and knowing what we've got, and getting some sort of handle on this. And in preparation, RiskIQ predicted that by 2021, cybercrime will cost the world $11.4 million every minute. That's staggering. That no wonder people are getting into cybercrime. There's just so much money to be made out of it. But even more scary than that is that these attacks are reported to be 500, almost a billion leaked records in November 2020 alone. And this is talking about not just a breach, this is like a hole in the dike, and there's floods of information going out here. Our question then is, if people don't actually, it's more of a statement. If people don't have a security strategy, how are they going to deal with this chaos? So my first question to you, when you walk into customers, do you see that there is security strategies in place in most of your customers?
I think, when you walk into a customer, you can actually tell that this customer has a strategy in place. I mean, like IT strategy, you can tell if the customer has an IT strategy because they know what they're doing. They know what the next steps are in terms of achieving their goals. So it's very early stages for customers that traditionally would have an IT strategy and they would add security into that IT strategy, and it's becoming sort of a drive that is mainly sparked by auditors. Not mainly our techs, but auditors will come in and say, show me your strategy around security, and then they will start thinking about that strategy and having it as a standalone strategy, and then ideally you'd want to add them together at the end of the day, because IT and security, they have to work hand in hand.
This series that's been put together by Micro Focus is really, this is one of the crescendo moments why they want local partners to be empowered and strong and on the ground, is because the strategy has to take into consideration the localization of the South African environment. And I think it's really great that you emphasize the role of enterprise architects and security architects in our last podcast. Can people overdo a security strategy?
Just like anything in life, it can be overdone. It depends on how you understand your organization if you're designing your strategy. So you need to have the business pillars in mind. If you're just designing it as a copy and paste from another organization, you would definitely overdo it because you're not taking into consideration the elements that are defining your business. So that is how easily a strategy can be overdone. If you a telco company, for example, and then you're taking security strategy from a bank, you probably miss a whole lot of things, and then some of the things irrelevant, and that becomes an overdoing of it.
So it's not a copy and paste from your neighbor. This is something that you build for yourself with the help of a partner.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Who are the actors that you need in this? Who are the participants in an enterprise security strategy for a business?
I think one of the key actors will be your business strategist, because that person defines your business. If you are, you're selling a product, what are your go-to-market strategies that will need to be embedded into your security strategy? Because if you don't take that into consideration, a single breach can damage your entire business because you didn't consider the key player in a business strategist who will be probably a business development manager or the CFO, maybe the CIO as well. So I think that becomes very key that you have, a marketing person as well to be a key role player into building your security strategy. It doesn't become an IT or a CISO exercise, it has to be a company-wide exercise.
And what is the purpose of the security strategy outside of the security team?
I think mainly is for making sure that the organization is secure. One of the most modern organizations or really grown organizations, they're combining both physical security in terms of what they're doing, in terms of access control, building into the holistic security strategy that will then encompass ICT in it. Because if you try and separate the two, you might miss something that an intruder can come through a physical building, for example, and finding a weakest link or a loophole. So you need to really have both the physical security and IT security working together.
I remember we did an architecture discovery for a company that had just upgraded their security quite significantly, and we found a telephone system, a PABX, with a port into the network which just nullified all of their security because it was an unintended opening in the network and they just didn't see it because of the physical device that was there, which was 17 years old. It was crazy. So if we've spoken about the actors in here, we've got business representatives, we've got business strategy, we've got CFO, CIO. Who owns it? Who is accountable for the strategy? Is it the CIO or is there a security person that owns it?
I would say it has to be owned by business because it combined both physical and IT. Because if you just let it be owned by CIO or CISO, as a new term of chief security officers, you might miss the combination of securing the physical environment and having it working hand in hand with the IT security. So a COO, for example, would be a good candidate for ownership.
Okay. And what does it need to communicate in the first two paragraphs? What does your security strategy need to communicate?
It has to talk around how the organization, enterprise-wide, has to communicate in terms of areas of concern when it comes to intrusion, from building to IT assets to financial assets, because ultimately what IT assets are all about, they're securing the financial assets of the organization.
So we were talking in the previous session about anticipating attacks, withstanding, recovering, and evolving from the attacks, contained within your strategy. I think that's a really good agenda points that we would be working through. How much time do you see people spending on this thinking asset of their strategy for security? Is it enough in your opinion?
I don't think it's enough. I think we need more time to think around security strategy, and also I think it evolves a lot because of the new ways of attacks that are coming into play from time to time. There has to be a review at least every quarter of the security strategy, because if you have it today, a new ransomware could be coming in the next quarter that you need to be aware of, and a different way of attack and different algorithms being used to attack.
What is the role of the vendor in your security strategy?
I think their role is to be a key player in terms of advising the customer together with us. When you go to talk to customers might really be reluctant to believe our story because we are a service provider having a player like Micro Focus, tagging along, customers would be like, we like to believe what a vendor would say than a service provider, because these guys are SMEs in this area and they are more invested, and then they're doing more R&D around the product, they're developing it. So I think their role is quite key in terms of being a trusted advisor.
Okay. And we've now grown into this world where it's no longer a cloud strategy. We've got strategies which either involve cloud, on-prem, hybrid, external data centers, workloads everywhere. How much of the cloud provider's approach to security strategy, their credentials, do we need to take into account in our enterprise security strategy? Is it a chapter or is it a different strategy?
I think it's a chapter, because if you're having a cloud service provider not invested in security, then it's a massive loophole for attackers. Because if I go to a cloud as a customer, I want the cloud service provider to give me that assurance that the leakages are going to be minimal. I'm better off to work with them than to be on-prem.
So we can't just make it their problem.
Absolutely, it has to be a combined, drive between a service provider and a customer, or a cloud service provider and a customer. Because if I just say, okay, put this SaaS solution for me without investigating and scrutinizing their security building blocks, then I might just, throwing money into a problem.
It's just throwing money away, yeah. The aim I've heard thrown around is zero trust when it comes to security and the security strategy. Is it zero trust is the ticket to the game, or is zero trust the aim of the game where we are going to?
I'd say
and what is zero trust?
I would say is the aim, because you want to build a strategy around security that doesn't give away anything. So you basically saying, I don't trust anything. I would suspect anyone is guilty until proven innocent. You walk into my environment, I don't trust you. That's basically how it defines zero trust.
Customer at the center of our focus, boys. Come on, you can't say that.
Absolutely. For me, I think, if a customer doesn't, or, you have a critical data that you're running into your environment, in your environment, and you're just allowing anyone to have access to it. You send me an email with an attachment. I have no policy around that attachment opening. I just open it. I have no bad cipher technologies to figure out what kind of file that's coming from external. I think a whole lot of phishing is done through emails that they just send you, and then you get excited and open it, and it damages your entire organization.
Wow. More I think about the strategy, the more I can imagine customers coming to you with a point solution. How do you move them from looking at a point solution to an enterprise strategy?
I think the first point is to help them build a strategy. Because if they're looking at a point solution, most likely they don't have a strategy. They're looking at dealing with a symptom without understanding the source of pain. So I would advise them to build a strategy if they do have, and maybe enhancing it.
Okay.
To look at holistic approach into a problem.
So BoaTech, together with the Micro Focus support, do you have a paint by numbers for a customer so we don't have to think this up ourselves, or is everyone a new engagement?
Typically, we would have a framework that we use for all our customers, and walking into a customer, we'll look at areas that and their business strategy and what they're all about, and re-look at it, and from the framework point of view, and look at the strategy that we want to focus on in that customer, and really help them by filling the blanks.
So I don't have to do all the thinking. You've done some of the thinking, so we can fast track this and reduce the time of exposure. Because the gates are open if you don't have a strategy.
Absolutely.
And do you find customers appreciate this, that you walk the journey with them, or do they still just want to put a plaster on the wound?
They really appreciate the walking of the journey with them, because I feel that when we do that, they appreciate the partnership rather than someone just coming in to make a quick buck. They feel that we have a partner that is going to help us through this journey.
That's awesome. That's a nice role to play. And I love the fact that Micro Focus is again emphasizing our SMME partners, and there's place for all the partners in this ecosystem. What do you think is your differentiator as BoaTech when we talk about walking a journey with the customer?
I think the key differentiator is what we bring into every customer in terms of our approach, looking at our framework into every customer, but our approach and how we take time to understand their business and what they want to achieve short and long term.
Awesome. When we look at our strategy that we're putting together with this customer, how important is your environmental and your network segmentation or segregation in the way forward? And do you see customers practicing this quite a lot, or is it a new concept to a lot of them?
I think customers are practicing quite a lot. The concept has been there for years. Yeah, in terms of network segmentation, because if you look at the origin of security, I think it's mainly emanated from perimeter security in terms of firewalls, and it has been practiced from that point of view where you segment your network when there is an attack or there's the network is down. You really segment it, and then you look at problems per point.
Awesome. In this security strategy, how much time do you dedicate to user awareness and education? And do you think there's enough being done on that in our market?
Absolutely not. There isn't enough user awareness. I really believe that organizations should start really having awareness campaigns, if not every quarter, but monthly, to educate their users or employees around security, around potential threats, around phishing, around different types of attacks that are happening in the market. Having a security team that should be out there looking for threats globally and knowing what is the new way of attacking a company, because that is the weakest link, where a user can just open an email thinking it's an innocent email, and even an internet email on a company device can really cause a damage. I think campaigns should be really happening more frequently than they are currently.
That's amazing. So it's hearts and minds with the technology behind it in order to get the security strategy working. If you had a poster child of an industry that's doing it well, which one would you point to where people can go and learn about lessons on getting a security strategy which is effective, economically viable, and efficiently changing depending on where the industry is going?
Look, I wouldn't mention by name, but I think banks are doing it quite well because they're very sensitive to any loss of data, any attack. It's bad for their business if you hear a bank that you're banking with being attacked or being under threat. So I think banks are aware, and they're doing really enough to secure their environment.
So if you had to take a customer for a site visit on how to get an effective strategy together, financial services, banks is somewhere you would go. Big up to the banks. I can attest to that from an applications perspective. You know me, I don't know enough about security, but application side, the banks really know their stuff. If you had to say the biggest problem you or your team have worked on strategies in the last year, what's the biggest challenge to getting an effective security strategy in place? What's stopping customers from doing that?
I think mostly customers are kind of reluctant to change, because security, it is a change into how you do things. The reluctance to change, and the fact that they haven't been threatened or attacked, that really keeps them not wanting to change. I think adapting to change and not knowing what kind of threat the business might be in. So I think the time has changed, the reluctance to change.
Okay. So from a strategic perspective, you think that a little bit more targeted information to change the hearts and minds, that this is a good exercise to do and should be done on a regular basis, would be good spend of your time and your customers?
Absolutely, because I think when you take them through a journey in understanding what could be happening, and as I mentioned earlier, some customers are actually looking at, as part of their strategy, to say, show me how quickly I can recover from a disaster, than telling me how I need to be more secure than I am right now.
So rather than prevent, they're saying, how do you pick up the pieces?
Exactly.
You know, I wrote a LinkedIn piece a couple of months ago where I said, thinking is not cheating. And it might just be a South Africanism, but I find a lot of people want to be doing rather than thinking. And the toughest thing about putting a strategy together is it requires thought. What would you say are 3 wise ways for someone to think before they get into the trap of doing when we are considering an enterprise security strategy?
Rather than 3, I would think of 1.
Okay.
Do more research around your industry and understanding what are the global key points that are driving your industry, and develop your strategy, security strategy for that matter, in line with those trends globally.
I like that. That's really good. And if I can summarize it for myself, it is, if you're a leader and you're responsible for putting the strategy together, understand what your peers are doing, because you don't have to learn from scratch. There is a paint by numbers. Select a partner that's got a rapid start for you for the strategy. Go and engage with the partner so that you can learn from their customers' mistakes, and then you don't have to make them. Then we're only making new mistakes. We're failing forward. I really enjoy that. Buzz, we are talking around strategy, which is sometimes difficult to stay on because we're not doing that. How do you strategize for BoaTech going into the next 18-month window with the changing world that we've had?
I think one of the key drivers that we're looking at with our industry and our customers is to look at every customer differently, even though we're approaching with the same framework, but we're looking at every customer differently and understanding the key areas that are driving that industry. I mean, if working from home for food processing is not really yielding results, we need to think in terms of how do we help them to be more productive. For a telco, how do we help them to be more productive in terms of how their business is growing through people taking more contracts on cell phone or otherwise. So we really need to think out of the box in terms of how our customers should be making more money or getting more business out of the difficult situations that we find ourselves in.
So you're spending time sitting in your customer's seat and trying to drive their agenda rather than the BoaTech agenda.
Absolutely.
I like that. If you had 10 times the budget that you had now, what would you spend it on, apart from a new Bianchi bike?
I think from a business point of view, I would spend it more on researching around the industry. There is a whole lot of things that are happening globally. I think would use the time to travel and learn about what peers in our industry are doing, service providers like us are doing elsewhere, in the world, different continents, because I think security cannot be looked at from a South African point of view. It has to be looked at globally because it is a global issue. It
is most definitely a global issue. And if I just go back to those statistics that we had, I mean, $11 million a minute is just frightening. $11.4 million a minute. It's quite frightening. And that security operations team is becoming more and more frontline for the organization. We used to be the people who worked after hours, didn't it?
Absolutely.
But now it's 24/7. Is there a seat at the boardroom table for this strategist and this security team, or do they still report into IT?
There definitely has to be a seat for a CISO into a boardroom, because threats do not wait for the next board meeting. They can happen anytime, and a CISO has to be there helping the CEO, the chairman of the board, around what are the key threats that we should be looking out for. The similar industry elsewhere in the world got attacked. We should be on the outlook.
I'm taking that as our soundbite for this episode. Threats don't wait for the next board meeting. And we can quote that to you. That's been an amazing one. As we wrap up this episode, again, my favorite question to you: what do you wish I had asked you in this episode?
I think this time I would say that's enough. I had enough questions for
you. Scared of answering the questions, man. Buzz, it's been wonderful to have you in camera again. It's been good to talk about strategy. It's an area that people love to pontificate about, but very seldom like to do. I think that if we took time to get the strategies down better, we'd probably get more areas to reflect on and improve our company. So I'm glad BoaTech is taking the time to do them. We'd like to just have a shout out, as we are halfway through this series of podcasts, to the channel at Micro Focus for enabling us to have this sharing of a new partner, to have the sharing of a platform to learn about security, and really from a small layer all the way through to the enterprise. It's very seldom that we're given this time to think. And we've emphasized that people like to be doing, they don't like to be thinking. I've enjoyed thinking today, and I'd like to wish you for the rest of your day. I hope no one asks you as many questions as I did. From myself, Daniel Robus, your host, it's been an honor and a privilege. I hope you have a magnificent day going forward. Bye-bye.
Thank you.